أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خير الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الأطيبين الأطهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفدا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. Please recite the salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Brothers and sisters, we are once again gathered here today to remember the master of martyrs, the leader of all martyrs, our master Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam. Let us call out to him in the manner recommended to us by the Ahlul Bayt alayhim assalam. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdillah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifinaik عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. All together now. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. Brothers and sisters, yesterday we began our discussion about freedom. I'll make a quick recap for some of the brothers and sisters who might not have been here yesterday. We discussed how freedom, the concept of genuine and authentic freedom, was an integral part of Islam, an integral part of the true monotheistic ethos. It was inseparable from monotheism. We talked about how genuine freedom can only be achieved through Islam, and that all other paths invariably lead to servitude, lead to slavery. In other words, we can make up the slogan, Al-Islam huwa al-hurriya, wa la hurriyatu illa bil-Islam. It is an exclusive relationship. Like the ulama say, illatun inhisariya. It is an exclusive cause that brings about the effect of freedom, true freedom. And obviously, when we started talking about true freedom, we also looked at the other fake versions of freedom that were peddled throughout history. And since we are living today, it was more pertinent for us to discuss Western uncivilization and the version and the brand of freedom that it wants to sell to us, and in more recent times wants to shove down our throats with coercion. We talked about this. We gave little glimpses into the different facets or so-called strengths of new barbarism in the West. New barbarism because Imam Khomeini called it tabahush al-gharbi. So we won't repeat all of that again. It was meant to be a catalyst for the brothers and sisters to do their own research. We only talked about some aspects of technology and some aspects of the economy. But if you look at the cultural structures in the West, if you look at the media in the West, if you look at the academia in the West, another of those idols that the West has, that many people think, oh, they are so advanced in the academia. But what is the output? I won't go into it right now because I don't have the time. But go and look at what their own scholars, their truly free scholars, free-thinking scholars, are talking about when they talk about their academia. One little glimpse of it was what happened in some of the universities in the United States, right? All of those slogans of academic independence and freedom, where did they all go? Down the drain. So we talked about that. And we talked about our dual failure, our twofold failure. The first failure, our inability to understand and appreciate the link between freedom and other integral concepts, but specifically freedom, because that is our topic in these 2 nights. Our inability and failure to understand ourselves, the inseparable link between freedom and Islam. So if we were to ask one of our brothers and sisters around the world, the believers, the followers, the lovers of the Ahlul Bayt, to just explain to someone else what the position of freedom is within Islam, in most cases they won't have any intellectual material to transfer. So that is a failure upon our right? Students like me have failed the community, and then the community has failed themselves. And then the second aspect of that failure is that when you don't know something, how are you going to propagate that and preach it and transfer it to the masses of the world? And obviously, because I keep mentioning this over and over again in my lectures, I'll just hint to it and go forth, that most of us don't even consider ourselves ambassadors of the Imam of our age and the system of wilayah. Apart from the students, because it is part of the culture to do tabligh, but the communities at large, a Shia normally does not see himself or herself as an activist for the cause of the Imam of the age, Ajallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. And this lack of understanding about their responsibility also reflects itself in their lack of understanding with regards to the Islamic revolution. Because as I have mentioned many times before, you can't understand the Islamic revolution if you haven't understood Islam. So the breakdown is there. The disconnect is there. So this was a little recap of what we did yesterday. And inshallah today we'll start talking about the true nature of freedom in Islam. What is freedom in Islam? What is this thing that I'm talking about? Genuine, authentic. What is it? And a little disclaimer here, obviously, a topic such as this might require, several weeks of discussions. But since we have limited time, we'll again only glimpse into certain aspects of it and then leave it to the brothers and sisters to do their own research. May Allah allow us to learn tonight about genuine freedom with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now before we go on, as I mentioned yesterday as well, the sources of our discussion here are the discourses, the lectures, the sermons of Imam Sayyid Agha. And that is how we try to remain within the parameters of the true Islamic discourse. So the first thing that Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei mentions in one of his lectures, and these lectures have been compiled into several books. I know at least two of them. I introduced one of them yesterday to the brothers and sisters who were sitting here and watching online. The first thing he mentions is that we need to get rid of a delusion, a misconception, before we even begin talking about freedom. And what is this disillusion? What is this misconception? The misconception is this, that many people believe that there is such a thing as absolute freedom. Many people around the world, they have been conditioned into thinking this, either by shaitan and his waswasaha, yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas, or by the structures created by satanic civilizations. They have been convinced that there is something called absolute freedom. You can't find it anywhere on earth, anywhere throughout history, but somehow, the capacity for us to delude ourselves is amazing. It might actually be one of the great miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He created the nafs in a manner that it can fool itself on the most ridiculous of things. Absolute freedom. I reject everything. One of those rebellious slogans that you see maybe youth around the world or even old people, especially some really bitter old people who like to call themselves the horsemen of new atheism. The horsemen. But this is a delusion. Let us dissect what absolute freedom might mean. And I'm not going to go into some advanced philosophical discussion, just a mental experiment so that you and I can relate to what's going on. Imagine you reject all forms of authority, divine or otherwise, religious and otherwise, right? What is the end product? Is it freedom? No. No matter what you do, no matter how far you try to run, you'll never escape the clutches of your own nafs. You'll still be obedient to your own carnal self. You'll still be obedient to that voice within you that's telling you not to be obedient to anyone else. So where's the freedom? Where's the freedom? You're still following something or the other. And interestingly enough, within the teachings of Islam, you have fallen into the clutches and the trap. You were trying to find absolute freedom, right? But you've fallen into the clutches and the trap of your worst enemy, according to the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt. The worst of your enemies. The Prophet of Islam used to cry and make dua and supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لا تقلنا على نفسي طرفة عين أبدا. لا تقلني على نفسي طرفة عين أبدا. Oh Allah, don't abandon me. Don't hand me over to my own nafs. That is how bad how worse a master the nafs is. The followers of the Ahlul Bayt should be the first to realize that. In another narration of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the nafs is described as a master that has no mercy. In the words of another dua, "Oh Allah, don't abandon me to a master that has no mercy for me." So how ironic and tragic is it? You're doing all you can, you're being rebellious, you're breaking all the taboos, you're an iconoclast, you're breaking all of these holy symbols of your society. You're feeling so emancipated, and you end up becoming a slave to the worst possible master. Now let us take a step further. Let us look at the nafs itself. Simple things. I'm not talking like high philosophy. And how can I? Some of the scholars who are experts of philosophy are sitting here themselves. What is the nafs? And especially the body that it serves in the Islamic point of view, right? The ulama say that it is a markab. It is your steed. It is your animal. It is your vehicle, right? Now imagine, let's go into a kind of a scenario here, right? Imagine riding a mule or a horse, right? And imagine you being the servant of the mule or the horse. How ridiculous is that? How utterly ridiculous is that? If you look at the different types of slavery, being a slave to Fir'aun, being a slave to Shaddad, being a slave to Namrud, being a slave to Zionism, being a slave to imperialism. And if you do an analysis, you'll find that even as opposed to all of these forms of slavery, the most demeaning, the most dishonorable form of slavery is a slavery to this mule. I serve my own donkey. See how, if you just start scratching the surface, things become very clear. So there is no absolute freedom. The Quran, interestingly, talks about this. In the conversation that Nabiyyina Yusuf, ala Nabiyyina wa alihi wa alayhi salam, he has in the prison with his companions. So it says in Surah Yusuf, verse 39, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا صاحبي السجن أأرباب متفرقون خير أم الله الواحد القهار. He talks to his companions, he says, "Oh my companions in this, oh my two companions in this prison, are many different lords and masters better, or the one master, Allah, the single, the Qahar, the all-powerful?" What is this verse telling us? The first message that it has for us is that there are just two options. Stop wasting your time, stop wasting your energies. There are just two options. You can either be in the service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you'll be in the service of arbabun mutafarriqun, many different masters. There is no middle path, there is no gray area, there is no escape route. Service to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or service to those ta'ghut. The second message that comes out from inside this very message is this: when you abandon true tawheed, you fall automatically into the lap of polytheism. So the option isn't this. This is not the option. Abandon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, acquire one other master. No. The moment you step out of tawheed, you fall into the antithesis of tawheed, into polytheism, into many different gods, into many different masters, one worse than the other. All of them juhala, ignorant, to say the least. All of them unempathetic to your cause, to your perfection, to say the least. Starting from the nafs and then going out into the socio-political systems, etc., etc., etc. So we find, according to the Quran, that true freedom will only be realized through true tawheed, true monotheism. And that is why the entire mission of all the anbiya, all of the great prophets, all of the great awliya, the saints, the shuhada, the salihin, can be summarized in one word: tawheed. Tawheed is that all-emancipating force. And that is why, brothers and sisters, when they couldn't destroy it, they tried to hijack it. In contemporary times, in recent history, versions of tawheed that had nothing to do with fighting injustice, had nothing to do with fighting social injustice, which inshallah my brother will be talking about tomorrow, had nothing to do with fighting tyranny, degraded, relegated into the most minimum and insignificant of issues, through Muslim Zionism. You all know what it is. Cutting off heads, the proxy of the Zionist regime and its handlers. They tried to hijack Tawheed as well. They couldn't, because Allah is the great planner. Tawheed is the umbrella. So if you present to the masses of the world, especially today, when they have become so open to the message, if you present to them Tawheed as it is through the Quran, through these simple arguments, no high philosophy, no high irfan, that might come later. We're not negating that. But if you present it in this manner, like Imam Khamenei has done in some of his lectures, it will hit the spot. But alas, unfortunately, not only does the enemy censor the deputy of the Imam of our age and his narrative, we, alhamdulillah, do self-censorship as well. Through, as I said, an assortment of excuses. Another thing that the Quran mentions is very interesting, because now that we have understood that there are only two options, it's either Allah or polytheism. It's either Allah or tyranny. It's either Allah or inequality. Either Allah or slavery. So these people trying to peddle atheism around the world, just a footnote here, the Quran talks to them as well in Surah Al-Hajj, verse number 15. He says, if you truly believe that there is no God who will come to the help of his prophet, the ulama have translated this in this manner, because it says, Allan yansarahu. So the who here for the students, the zamir here, the pronoun here has been turned back to the prophet. But in terms of brainstorming our own ideas as well, you can turn this back to any human being. This could signify any human being. If you truly believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't help you, that there is no God, that there is no help coming from God, there is no support coming from God, then it's a very beautiful verse. He says then, there is no point to go on. I'm paraphrasing the translation. There's no point in going on then. Just tie a rope to the roof and end it. Why? Because the other option is to die a terrible death, slowly being poisoned by the tyrannical systems of the world. See how nihilistic life becomes when you are thinking that there is no God, when you abandon Tawheed, when you are hoodwinked, conditioned, brainwashed into thinking that this is some sort of great emancipating freedom. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in religion. No. It's suicide. So atheism, brothers and sisters, isn't just a delusion. The fool wrote a book called God Delusion, right? Atheism isn't just a book. Atheism isn't just an idea that is a delusion. It is a dangerous delusion. Not just for society, but for the atheist himself. Another guy from these four horsemen, I won't take his name, it's Sharam Amiyad. But he's this great champion. He's a neuroscientist. He peddles in philosophy as well, The interesting thing about him is that he rejects all forms of patriarchal tyranny. Great champion of freedom and liberation, emancipation of the women and the children of the world. When asked about the Zionist regime, he starts mumbling his words. He says, you see, the proportion of the Zionist Jews in the world is so small that they, it makes sense for them to be this violent in trying to protect themselves. Some things can't be said in English because the sense doesn't come across. With apologies to people listening around the world. You were a great freedom fighter. You were emancipating the people of the world from the clutches of Christianity and Islam. Never really talking about the third option. That too is interesting. But when it came to the Zionist regime, oh no. I'm going to be an apologetic genocide enabler. But this is again planning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They plot in Allah plans to tear the veils off of the faces of these people. So brothers and sisters, because these nights are dedicated to remembering Imam Hussein and his cause and his struggles, we're not going to go into a huge detail about these theoretical issues. I just wanted to, spark your imaginations, the youngsters here especially, or the youngsters listening around the world. Do your research. It's not very difficult. Read the books of Ayatollah Shahid Mutahari. Read the books of Ayatollah Muhammad Baqir as-Sadr. Read the texts of Imam Khomeini and Imam Khamenei. 20 years ago, maybe, we had very few translations, etc. Now the internet is flooded with it. try to find out what Islam truly is with the motivation and intention of becoming an activist for global change. The dua we recite every time. And I like to think myself that I am following in the footsteps of this great man, Ayatollah Misbah, Rizwanullah Ta'ala alayhi. We always saw him in his Dars Akhlaq. He would always recite this dua, the dua of Imam Zaman. In the last section of this dua, what does it say? Ardaka taw'a. When Imam will return, the earth will welcome him with open arms. Yes, there will be fighting as well, but the overall current, how will that happen? But Allah has done a lot of it himself, as we talked about yesterday. This grand divine intervention through the blood of the shuhada, the pure blood of the shuhada. You can see their hands working miracles around the world. Who could have thought that a gathering, a music festival, right? A music festival would become the stage of tabarra. Today's tabarra. Death to the IDF. Who could have thought that would happen? The inherent nature of people is waking up. And we are still looking at our patients and thinking, oh, this guy is sick, he's ill, I'm not going to go towards him. Then why are you a doctor? Especially the scholars, especially the ulama, the students who go around the world to do tabligh. God has done the difficult work, He's done the legwork here. The shuhada are working their magic. The children of Gaza, the children of Yemen, they're working their magic. They're showing you how true this verse of the Holy Quran was when Allah declared, بَلْ هُمْ أَحْيَاءٌ. They are alive. Again, because this is an academic audience. Brothers and sisters, in Islamic philosophy, does the soul die? Does the soul ever die? The body dies, the soul remains. Goes into barzakh, then goes into other realms, etc., till Yawm al-Qiyamah. The body of the shuhada also dies, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. So why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlighting them, saying they are alive? If it's just the same life as the soul, then everyone's souls, even the sinners are alive. Even the worst enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their souls are alive. So what's special about the life of the shuhada? The difference, brothers and sisters, as the scholars point out, and as the shuhada saw with their own eyes before they became shaheed, in the many fronts of Islam, in the words of Haj Qasim Soleimani. The difference is this: when a normal person dies, their ability to affect and influence this world, this realm, is taken away. So they are basically downgraded. But when the shaheed becomes shaheed, when he is blessed with martyrdom, his hands are opened up. He's not only hayy, he is more hayy than he was before. He is more alive. He is more potent. And you see this in the fabric. Trying to explain this to an audience who haven't seen this happening in their own lives, on the mass media, that might have been difficult. Sughra Kubra Natija, the argumentation, bringing stuff from Islamic philosophy, from the narrations, and still half of you wouldn't be convinced. Because that is the nature of academic discussions. Normally doesn't end with certainty. It ends with more discussion. That's the nature of knowledge. But when you experience something, that's a different thing. So brothers and sisters, the shuhada have already done the legwork. Now, it's up to us. And this in itself is imtihan. This is the test. Allah creates the groundworks. He's not going to do the entire thing himself. Because if that is what he was supposed to do, then he would have done it on day one. The entire philosophy of existence is to make us move towards perfection, towards our duties. So alhamdulillah, Allah gave us the opportunity to talk about the true nature of freedom. And inshallah, the brothers and sisters throughout the world, especially those who are here, will pursue these discussions in their own time. But since today is the 4th of Muharram, I want to talk about a shaheed who is not often talked about. I'm not going into Masaib yet. Just a bit of a history lesson, a refresher for all of us. So many of these shuhada in Karbala, nobody talks about them. Each of them being an epic, but nobody talks about them. Again, a disservice. The 4th of Muharram, according to some narrations, some historical narrations, is the martyrdom of Qais ibn Mushir, also called Qais ibn Musahhar. There's a disagreement about the name of his father. Qais ibn Mushir as-Saydawi al-Asadi, a great champion of Islam. And I'll explain who this person was. Why is he famous in the history books? Because he was the tireless messenger of Imam Hussein. He was the communications wing of Imam Hussein's mission and his movement. Some of his achievements, obviously I don't have the time to go into it like in detail. In this particular episode within history, the context of Karbala, his role starts when he brings some of the letters from Kufa, from the elders of Kufa, to Imam Hussein. Then he becomes part of Muslim ibn Aqil alayhi salam's party, as Muslim is making his way towards Kufa. And that famous first letter that Muslim writes back seeking advice from Imam Hussein in mid-journey, that letter is brought back by Qais to Imam Hussein. And then the answer to that letter is brought back to Muslim in lightning speed. Then when he continues his journey with Muslim, he reaches Kufa. And he becomes one of those core elements within the revolutionary movement of Kufa, within the house of Mukhtar, which became the gathering place. Now the brothers and sisters around the world who are watching online, even if you haven't read history or haven't had the time, alhamdulillah, one of the blessings of the Islamic revolution is that now you have probably seen history over the internet in Mukhtar Nama. One of the blessings of the revolution, right? So he's one of those elements. He plays a key role in going to the tribe of Bani Asad, because he himself is Asadi, and delivering to them the message that the movement has started in Kufa. So people like Habib ibn Mazahir alayhi salam, they rushed towards Mukhtar's house. And that nucleus of the Kufan revolution that unfortunately failed later on began to take shape. Then we find that he returns back to Imam Hussein, taking Muslim ibn Aqil's letter of confirmation that the people of Kufa are ready. And we all know the history of that. After that, he becomes part of Imam Hussein's contingent. And he's moving with the caravan. Now here there is a disagreement. Imam Hussein, after finding out about the treachery of people in Kufa and the martyrdom of Muslim ibn Aqil alayhi salam, he gives Qais a letter and sends him to Kufa. The contents of that letter: as far as I know, has not been recorded. But now this person, now it's interesting as we go on, because I'm trying to be very brief. This person, he is also an expert of covert warfare. So he's not just a messenger. Throughout this time, he has used his expertise to avoid the enemy soldiers who are controlling the main routes between Kufa and the caravan of Imam Hussein, trying to break this link of communication. So he's an expert. He knows how to take routes which are little known, knows how to travel through the night. So he's a full-fledged guerrilla warfare, an expert of guerrilla warfare. But unfortunately, in his last mission at a place called Qadisiyah, Hussein ibn Numayr, with the Saad, Hussein. This is the same person who history says is the killer of Ali al-Akbar alayhi salam. This Mal'un and his troops are able to trap Qais and to arrest him. So what does Qais do? His first instinct, he tears the Nama apart, he tears the message apart, the letter, eats it up, destroys it. During these past events that we had only recently, everyone was telling each other, we were telling each other, tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr, to adopt the example of Imam Khomeini when he said, Namidunam ittalayna daram. I don't know, I have no information. These are teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. This guy didn't go to some university to learn about espionage and learn about covert warfare, etc. Trained by the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. So Hussein, with the thought, he dispatches Qais back to Kufa to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad lanatullah alayhi. And there is this beautiful, very interesting discussion between Ibn Ziyad and Qais, in which there is basically an interrogation, in which Ibn Ziyad asks, who are you? He doesn't even disclose his name. He says, I am a man, just a man, a common man, from amongst the followers and the lovers of Ali and his children. Ibn Ziyad becomes frustrated. He says, why did you tear up the letter? Because the captors had seen him destroy the letter. He says, why did you tear up the letter? And Qais is very explicit about it. He's very forthright. He says, so that you wouldn't understand what was written within. So Ibn Ziyad becomes more aggravated. Who was the letter from? And who did it address? So Qais knows that, everyone knows that he's a messenger of Imam Hussain. So he says that the letter was from Imam Hussain to some of the people in Kufa. Again, he's basically giving Ibn Ziyad information that has already been disclosed, right? So look at the dikkah, look at the precision of this person under pressure, imminent death before his eyes, facing someone like this mal'oon, the accursed Ibn Ziyad, knowing what has happened to Muslim Ibn Aqil alayhi salam. Look at the confidence of this man. So Ibn Ziyad, he gets more flared up and he says, by God, you will not leave this court until either you tell me what was in that letter, or you go on the mimbar and curse Ali and Hussein and his children and his followers. So Qais, he smiles. He says, no, I'm not going to tell you what the letter is about. But option 2 seems interesting. Qais, what are you talking about? And these are his words recorded by history, testified to by the enemy. He says, I won't tell you what the letter was, but I'm okay with cursing. An expert of Toria. Learn taqiyya, brothers and sisters. Taqiyya in the service of the mission, not as an anomaly against the mission, in abandonment of the mission. He says, I'm all right with cursing. Hasf muta'allaq kard, in the words of the Tullah, right? So he goes up on the mimbar and Ibn Ziyad, he thinks, okay, propaganda victory, excellent. This is going to be interesting. I couldn't break Muslim Ibn Aqil. He was Bani Hashim. But this guy, I got him by the neck. So he goes onto the mimbar, they gather the people around, the people of Kufa, the dignitaries, etc., the common people. And Qais begins, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala khayril anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Right? And then he says, وَاللَّعْنَةُ الدَّائِمَةُ عَلَىٰ عَدَائِهِ. And then he starts naming them, Ubaydillah ibn Ziyad, wa Bani al-Umayyah. And then he declares, I am the messenger of Imam Hussain to you. And let me finish my hujjat upon you. Rise up for Hussain, for there is still time to rise up for Hussain. And now there's this propaganda coup. I can imagine Ibn Ziyad, his blood pressure. Right? So he starts foaming at his mouth and he tells his soldiers to take Qais to the roof of the palace, the governor's palace. And they tie up his hands and they kick him down and he falls on his face. Sheikh Mufid writes that all of the bones in his body were broken. And people could listen to him wheezing. You know when someone is at the cusp of death, but just hanging on, your jaw is broken, your skull is broken, your ribs are broken, your legs, your arms are broken. Blood, it gathers up in your lungs, comes into your throat, you can't talk anymore. There's this gurgling sound. Survivors of the 8-year war, the Sacred Defense War, survivors of the war for the preservation and protection of the holy shrines, sometimes here in Qom they have these sessions, sometimes before the Majalis in Muharram, and they tell you about the Shuhada, things that they have seen with their own eyes. So one mal'oon, he steps forth. History records his name as Abdul Malik ibn Umair, and he cuts Qais's head off. And the people start shouting, why did you do this? Why did you do this? And he senses a bit of danger and he says, I just wanted to put him at rest. And not really an important detail on the face of it, but if you connect this to what I said earlier, brothers and sisters, excuses all around. Why do you care for Qais's broken body now, when you couldn't protect him when he was sitting on the mimbar? Oh, people of Kufa. And how does a man who has just now inhumanely slaughtered Qais, like some goat, ISIS fashion, how are you satisfied with this lame duck answer? Because brothers and sisters, slavery to the nafs makes you a slave to excuses, and the abyss of excuses is never ending. That is the lesson in these last few lines of the history of Qais alayhi salam, the great messenger, the general of communications for Imam Hussain. A person named Tirimah ibn Adi brings news of Qais's martyrdom to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And in history it is recorded that Imam Hussain, he weeps. The entire length of his face is awash with tears, and he says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, wa minhum man qada nahbah, wa minhum man yantazir, wa ma baddalu tabdila. This is Imam Hussain. And this is the verse that came down in the context of the martyrdom of Ja'far Tayyar alayhi salam. If we know who Ja'far is, if we know what the Prophet said about Ja'far alayhi salam, if we know what Ali alayhi salam said about Ja'far alayhi salam, we would know the significance of Imam Hussain saying this about Qais. Brothers and sisters may have heard this in the Masa'ib of Sayyidina Ja'far alayhi salam, in the Masa'ib of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, in the Masa'ib of Awna Muhammad alayhi salam as well. That Imam Ali, when he was left alone in Medina, one of his famous sentences is this: if only Ja'far and Hamza were beside me. That is the place that Ja'far holds. In Imam Hussain, he's reciting the same verse for Qais. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be such soldiers for our Imam and the deputy of our Imam. For indeed, there is no service to the Imam of our age without being in service to the deputy of that Imam. Tonight we remember Sayyidina Qasim ibn al-Hasan alayhi salam. Brothers and sisters, when it became time for the Bani Hashim to go out into battle, they went out, fought bravely, courageously, like the lions of Bani Hashim, like the inheritors of Ali alayhi salam. And then it came to Qasim, the inheritor of Hasan al-Mushtaba, Sibt Rasulullah. Now, history reports that Qasim was very young at that time. So Qasim, he comes to his uncle, Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and he asks for permission. You know, it's very interesting, because the Quran says that in the Prophet you have uswatun hasana. In our ulama, they teach us that there is no difference between the Prophet in his role and the Ahl Bayt alayhi salam. It is a role that is inherited. So all of them are uswatun hasana. Brothers and sisters, this youngster, he feels this yearning to perform his duty for his Imam. Are we training ourselves? Are we training our children in this manner? Maybe we would have told ourselves that, you know, this is something which is specific to the Ahlul Bayt. It is a miraculous form of training and education and nurturing. Maybe we could have made up that excuse if we had not seen so many 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 12-year-olds fighting like lions in the sacred defense war. Go around Qum, in the sacred graveyards of the martyrs. They always have the age of the martyr written on the gravestone. There's a book called Sayyid Agha, 13-year-olds. It has the stories and the last wills and testaments of these martyrs, many of these martyrs. So Qasim ibn al-Hasan, he says, "Oh uncle, oh my beloved uncle, it is now my turn. I want to shine. I want the Prophet to look from the heavens, look at me and say, Marhaba, Marhaba. Ali Akbar has done his part. Now it's my time." Imagine growing up in a family, knowing about the masa'ib of Lady Fatima al-Zahra, salamullah alayha, knowing about the loneliness of Ali ibn Abi Talib, knowing about the loneliness of Hasan ibn Ali alayhi salam, knowing about all of these trials and tribulations and calamities and sufferings, and just thinking to yourself, one day I will shine. And now was the time for Qasim to shine. But how could Hussein give him permission? When he looked upon the face of Qasim, he saw his brother shining through. How can I send my brother to be martyred once again? I saw him die and be martyred in front of my own eyes. Now shall I see his son do the same? So Imam Hussain, he keeps rejecting his requests. And history writes that Qasim starts kissing his uncle's hands, and then he starts kissing his uncle's feet, and he says, "Uncle, please allow me to go forth." I imagine Qasim saying, "Oh uncle, don't look at my young age, don't look at my small height. I will make you proud. Oh uncle, I'll make you proud. Let me perform my duty." And in the end, Imam Hussain gives him permission. And history writes that he goes into battle wearing a shirt, probably because no armor would fit his body. He was small. And the enemy says, two men having a conversation in the enemy's camp, they look upon Qasim. And one of them says, "I see a radiant face, but he has no armor on. And look at his feet. The laces of one of his shoes are also torn apart. Qasim, oh Qasim, Ya Mawlaya, is this how a soldier goes into battle? Qasim replies, yes, this is how a true soldier goes into battle, because Tawheed teaches us that our strength comes from our belief, not from our material resources. This is the same Qasim who said that death to me in the cause of wilaya, in the cause of truth, is sweeter than honey. So one of these mal'ooneen, he says, by Allah, I will be the one to kill this boy. And the other, he is amazed. He says, look, he's already surrounded by hundreds of soldiers. What do you want to do? He says, no, by God, I will split his head open. But before that, brothers and sisters, let us look upon how Qasim goes into battle. Look upon the basira, the insight, the jihad, the tab'een of Qasim. He goes into battle and he recites these verses. In tanquruni fa'ana far'ul hasan, sibtun nabiy al-mustafa wal-mu'taman. If you're laughing at me, if you reject me and my position as a great warrior, then know that I am a branch of the steadfast tree known as Hasan al-Mujtaba. The sibt of the Payambar, the sibt of the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the chosen and the trusted Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is who I am. Why is he saying this? He wants to tell everyone there, you are fighting the entirety of Islam, not just a child. إن تنقروني فأنا فرع الحسن سبت النبي المصطفى والمؤتمن هذا حسين كالعسير المرتحن بين أناس لا سقوا فوق المزان. This Hussein, who you have degraded in this manner, that now he's being treated like a prisoner, a ransomed prisoner. Between these people gathered here today, may Allah never quench their thirst with true water, true cold refreshing water. He highlights the position of Imam Hussein. He highlights the position of the Ahlul Bayt. He highlights the situation of Imam Hussein right now and the role of the enemy, and immortalizes these words in history. And then he fights. And wallahi, he removes all doubts. Soon the smiles on the faces of the enemy turn into sneers as they flee from his sword. He fights them, cuts them down, until the mal'oon approaches him and hits him on the head with his sword. You know, history doesn't say much about how he approached Qasim ibn al-Hasan. But you know Qasim, he is the son of Hassan, he is the grandson of Ali, he's been trained by Abbas. Wallahi, I know that he did not approach Qasim ibn al-Hasan from the front. La'natullahi alayhi. But Qasim ibn al-Hasan, when he is hit on the head, he falls down. And then the hyenas and the wolves, they approach. And then they start taking their portion of the kill. And Qasim, he calls out to his uncle. And Imam Hussein, he raises him. And he falls to his knees beside his nephew. And he says, oh Qasim, it's very hard for your uncle to listen to your pleas and be helpless. Ya Hussein, you're calling yourself helpless. Don't use these words in front of Qasim, Ya Hussein. He may be a child, but he has the same ghaira as Abbas. Oh Hussein, don't say these words. And when he approaches Qasim, history says Qasim's broken body lies there on the sand. And he's rubbing his feet on the ground. So Imam Hussein, he raises him up into his arms. And history says that when he brings him back to the camp, the legs of Qasim ibn al-Hasan were touching the ground, they were dragging against the ground.
The scholars say that maybe his body was so broken that his muscles and his bones had been dismembered, disjointed, and they were dragging on the ground. But somehow, I imagine that there can be another version when Imam Hussein carries the beloved body of his nephew in order to try to alleviate his pain. He doesn't stand up. Maybe Imam Hussein returns to the camp on his own knees, trying to carry this most weighty of weights. He must have been thinking, Qasim, you're so small, but why can't your uncle raise you up? Why can't your uncle get the heart to raise you up? Because, oh, Hussein, don't you remember you had said before that your bow back has been broken? And so Hussein brought Qasim back to his camp and laid him beside the body of his son Ali al-Akbar and said, Oh Allah, be a witness of what they have done to us. Allah la'anatullahi ala al-qawmi al-zalimin. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. A few words of dua, brothers and sisters. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والنصر، واجعلنا وأولادنا وذريتنا جميعا قافة من أحسن عابانه وأنصاره، والعارفين بحقه والمحبين له حق محبته، والمدين لأوامره، والدائمين في خدمته، والراغبين فيه، والمشتاقين إليه، والذابين عنه، والمستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم اجعل قلبه راضيا منا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم احفظ وأيد وانصر قائدنا نائب حجتك المهدي السيد علي الخامنئي، وعلماءنا الحق ومجاهدين في سبيل الله، والثورة الإسلامية والمقاومة الإسلامية، إنك على كل شيء قدير.